welcome back.
All right, that was for you, soon to be Dr. Maria Beagle.
Thank you. Thank you.
You haven't been on Serious and Silliness for some time, so I want to welcome you back.
Thank you. Thanks. It's good to be back.
So why don't you tell the audience what you've been doing? Apparently you've been like teaching classes and working and going batshit.
Yeah, I continue to be a full-time therapist, school counselor, and part-time teaching 2 classes at a local community college virtually online. And then I just accepted another job to teach online as well. So a lot on my plate, but you know, I like money.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
Yeah.
What type of college classes are you teaching?
Intro to psych stuff. Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So we have a new serial killer that we're going to talk about today.
Yes.
On episode, this is number 4, right? Yeah, this is volume 4.
Okay.
Yeah.
I haven't been counting. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay. It's my job to count.
Yeah.
All right. So tell us who this is, and why don't you give us a background on who this person is or was.
So we have Jesse Harding Pomeroy. He was born 1860. He became active in his, right before killing, he became active in his criminal behavior at 11 years old. So in 1871. Now this is a boy who grew up in a household that was very unstable, an abusive household. You described what the dad did to him.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Where he was from Massachusetts, you said, right?
Massachusetts, yes, yeah.
Okay, so late 19th century Massachusetts. I can only imagine. I'm sure crime would be a commonplace during that time period, especially in that area. I would think in Boston.
But how common for 11-year-olds?
No, that's not common at all. No, that's not common at all.
No.
So from what I found out is that his father was a heavy drinker, and he used to beat his kids so bad, but sometimes he would even take them in the back of the house with him and his siblings, strip them down naked, and beat them mercilessly, like, terribly. Yeah. It wasn't just a spanking; this was a beating.
Yeah, and from what I've read is he had a cleft palate, which my assumption is in the late 1800s, a cleft palate was not only uncommon and not very fixable, but the severity of it, I wonder about too. There aren't a lot of pictures of him around. But so when you fast forward past that, the traumatic childhood, young childhood, and we get to the preteen years of around 11 years old is when he started to become super aggressive, and he would physically assault little boys in the neighborhood. He used to lure them into back alleys and lure them in very secluded areas, and he would even make them strip, and he would beat them horribly or poke them with sharp objects. It was just such a ruthless act that this 11-year-old boy was doing. And as a therapist, I wonder, and it's not in the research, but I wonder if his, slight deformity had something to do with that, as well as the trauma he was suffering, the abuse. But I mean, you mix it all together, but you have here a very insecure 11-year-old boy. And when you have insecure children, a lot of times they either go 2 ways with it. They become very shy recluses and not very confident individuals, or they overcompensate and become bullies. That's typically what happens with insecure children. So now you have this prepubescent 11-year-old, and he just totally went drastically wrong, and he hurting, physically abusing boys his age or younger. So, and that's just the start, honestly. So he's 11 years old, and he's abused, physically abused. There's no sexual abuse or research out there to show sexual abuse, but he would physically abuse these boys, and eventually he was caught, because how many kids in the neighborhood had a cleft palate.
Okay.
So these boys who survived the beating all gave the same description of Jesse Pomeroy.
Okay.
And they catch him. And he is sent to juvenile detention. I believe his sentencing was for several years, but he wound up only serving a year and a half. And
before he, when he went to juvie, he didn't actually kill anybody yet. It was more beatings and tortures.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Did you find out in detail, or some detail, of how he would torture them? Because I, from the little bit of research that I looked into, one of his victims was a 4-year-old, and he was hanging inside of some kind of shed.
Yeah.
And his hands, the 4-year-old's hands were hung by some kind of rope, somewhat like this. And his hands he was found by 2 guys that heard screams, and his hands were blue, and the rest of his body was extremely white, and he had a lot of welts from being beaten on his back.
Yeah, so I saw some research of that too, that he often took them into secluded areas. That he did tie them up, and he would beat and even use a knife and often cut them. And again, he didn't kill them, but it was just such a brutal beating. It was very torturous.
One of his victims was able to get away, right? One of his victims.
People heard. So what I read is that someone heard what was going on.
Okay.
Yeah, and they were able to identify him again because of his deformity.
Okay.
So what's interesting is in the research that I found is that he served his 1.5 years in a juvenile detention, and they said, yeah, he's good to go, and they released him. So he's being released, and he hasn't killed anyone yet, but the mindset is, I'm going to go back to doing what I'm doing, but this time I need to kill them so they don't identify me.
Okay.
So that's what I found in the research. Now he get released in the same area in which he grew up in. So he is somewhat known. Again, there's probably not 11-year-olds who are beating up to 7 boys younger than him in the area. There's
relatively extremely younger than him and smaller too. I mean, he was about 11 or 12, and he was picking on kids 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old max.
Well, that fits the insecurity. So if you notice when the bullies are insecure, and who did they pick on? They're not picking on the biggest person in the school.
Right.
They're picking on the smallest and vulnerable, and that's exactly what he was doing. His attraction to his victims was how vulnerable they were, and he found the ones. And plus, if you're going to do something like this, you want to do it right, and you're not going to get someone who's bigger than you, power over people. And it's amazing to have that mindset again at 11 years old. And then it just becomes more distorted, upon 13, 14, when he is up with the killings.
He was only in juvie for a year and a half, so things were extremely different back then. Things were very lax. Right there, I'm sure there wasn't much.
There weren't many psych evals going on.
Yeah, not. It's way before Freud.
Yeah, yeah. There's not much psychological evaluations or assessments being done. Because we're just talking about a holding cell to keep this very aggressive boy who, while in his holding cell, is doing well, and they're like, nah.
Yeah, he's fine. Yeah.
Fine, he's fine.
Okay.
And then they release him, and again in the same area he grew up in, and that's when a little boy is murdered, right? The first, so I have to find.
Is it a little boy or a little girl?
For 2, yeah. Was the first one a girl or a boy?
I think the first one was a girl when he almost decapitated her. Right?
Yeah. Okay. Yes. And And I believe he's only charged with actually killing 2. Did you find that as well? Which is interesting.
No, I know he killed a little girl. He was working with his brother, right, in some kind of, I think, a bakery or something. Am I accurate? And or he's working.
Newspapers.
Oh, right. Newspapers, and he sent his brother to go get like bread or something like that because he lured the little girl into the basement.
Yes.
Right.
So yes, there's a 10-year-old girl from South Boston named Katie Curran, and then she went missing. And then the body of a 4-year-old boy is found.
That's right. Okay.
And immediately the police is like, wait a minute, because when you don't have little kids dying when he's away, and now all of a sudden he's home in the same area, and
right.
2 kids are found dead in the same area, who are you going to look at? So they immediately go to him, and he's charged. Now, I couldn't find this, but did he confess? Or
For sure he did confess. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But he confessed because, from what I understand, there was this way before Miranda rights, and they were able to hold him there as long as possible. And they basically told him, look, if you don't confess, we're going to give you like 100 years, and
they wore him down.
They were able to like lie to him and wear him down. And finally he just confessed.
It's interesting. Because with someone as sociopathic as himself, mm-hmm. to be worn down, well, that goes with age too. I mean, truly, he's still young.
Yeah, he's very young.
I wonder if a grown man would have truly been worn down by that, as distorted as the way his thinking was. But yeah, okay. So they had his trial, and I know when he was given the death penalty. Did you see
No,
that?
I didn't get that far, really.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. So they waited till he was an adult, I believe, for the death penalty, but the governor was like, I can't do it. Or they did not wait until he was, until he was an adult. I think he was only 16.
Wow.
And they refused, and the governor was like, I'm not complying with this. So they said it's life in prison, but in solitary. He was supposed to have life in solitary confinement.
Oh my God.
So then later down the road, and he was a young man, he wasn't older. They said, we'll give you some privileges. You won't be stuck in solitary. And he actually, Jesse Pomeroy, I think I'm saying it right, by the way.
I think you're right.
Yeah. He didn't want that. The least he wanted was to be pardoned. And they're like, we're not going to be pardoned. That's not happening. But but then he complied more and more to some privileges. So he got to like go to the movies in prison and kind of do some things. And it's very interesting. They said he somewhat became a scholar. He was learning different languages. And
really?
Yep. And he was studying a lot, and he essentially did die an old man in prison.
Wow, that's impressive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I believe he died in 1932. So in 1929 he was transferred to Bridgewater Hospital for the criminally insane, and then he died in 1932.
Okay.
Which is interesting. I believe that would make him 62 years old, 62 or 72 years old, because he was born in 1860.
So if a crime like that were to happen today, what would be the process to help somebody like that?
Good question. So in my studies, and I can't say it's across the board with the juvenile system, but the understanding and the psychological part of it is that when you're under a certain age, there is still a lot of maturation to be done, which is maturity. So when young children are committing crimes, it is not common to sentence them to either life or death in prison. What they hope for is rehabilitation. because they haven't matured. They haven't fully hit puberty. They haven't fully matured, you know, and maybe their background was so awful that now's the time to help them, kind of thing. So that is the psychological part of it. As far as justice system, it's not across the board in that sense. You know, you have school shooters who go on murder sprees, which are different than serial killers, murder sprees. And their sentencing is a lot different, you know, than what I was just saying, you know, the whole, they have time to mature and trauma and stuff like that. So it is different across the board now. But the understanding and the psychological process is that there's so much more to be grown, to mature, to develop in this young one's mind. You know, is it fair to sentence them to something that they're doomed for the rest of their lives? Right. You could go either way. If you're a victim of the person they murdered, you're not obviously, but a lot of family members would say, done, throw away the key. Like, I don't want this person ever out again. And again, not everyone feels that way, but and then there are others, you know, the doctors that are like, you know, let's see what happens. He's been rehabilitated for 30 years, and
right.
But it's
now,
a very.
If somebody is charged today as a minor with murder, how does that work? I mean, do they send it to juvie? Is it varies from state to state as far as whether they are charged as an adult, or how does
I think it does vary from what I mean, first of all, they determine, you know, are we committing them? Or are we going to do a maximum security hospital facility? Because this young child is, you know, not only behaviorally a misfit, but they're insane, you know. So they look at that. They look at other options as far as, do you try them as an adult? There's been those issues. And then, you know, what's the state have to offer? Is this a federal level? And when you go federal, I mean, they could go anywhere in the country. So it truly just depends on the judge, really, and where it goes from there.
This type of person it seems to be isolated. That doesn't seem to be in many young kids that are this violent. As well, let me rephrase that are this sadistically violent.
Yeah, right? Sadistic is a very good word to describe him, definitely.
Because I don't. Why do you think that someone so sadistic was molded, if you will, in the 19th century, but we don't get it so much now? I mean, you get kids that have a violent streak, but it's basically, you know, mostly fistfights or whatnot. This seems to be kind of set in very, very young, to the point where it's almost past the point of help.
So what we have now is research and history. You know, you have the criminal behavior unit that was formed to figure this stuff out. You know, if we have all these serial killers that are grown men have the same history of hurting animals, maybe this is something as teachers and as parents that we should be aware of. And then that should be like, wait a minute, I need to get my kid evaluated.
That's right. Hurting our pets. Did have pets that went missing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't read that. That's not in the research I found, but okay.
That's right.
That makes sense.
They had a bird, and the bird's head was snapped off or twisted or whatnot.
It doesn't surprise me. Yeah.
They had a cat, or I think his neighbor had a cat, and he tortured the cat, and then the mother actually was like, "That's it, no more pets in the house." You know.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're absolutely right. I guess back then they didn't kind of think anything of that leading to something more severe, but now we know that that's a huge symptom of something that could lead on to personality.
There's like a checklist, you know, and if you have a kid in school who's hurting animals and well, I don't know, in school grade, okay, and parents notice he's hurting animals, he's bedwetting, he likes to light fires, he likes to do all these distorted things,
Mhm.
that now in this time period is understood to be like warning signs. So I think why we don't see it as much is because we have so many professionals in both the behavior field, the psychological field, even the educational field that can sort of will be more proactive than what they had in 1871.
Mhm.
So yeah, essentially it's profiling, and we're able to do that now.
I also read that when they, the mother of the little girl who went missing went to the police department, and they didn't even know that he was released from juvie. They were saying that the police were saying that no, it can't be. He doesn't. He's still in. He's still in juvie. Like he get. They didn't, because there was such a lack of way to communicate back then. They didn't even realize that. And then the mother had to go back a second time, and the detective was like, okay, fine, and he sent a police officer to the scene of the crime that she claimed, and then to the house, and then that's when they kind of like, oh, okay,
They put it together.
they put it, yeah, they kind of put it together.
Yeah,
And
like what was
they were like,
probation like, or what was,
yeah,
when a child, and we get, and where I work in the alternative school setting, we do get students that are released from a detention center or probation, or yeah, detention center, and they're on probation, and there's just nothing but communication about, are they attending, are they participating in therapy, are they participating in group therapy, are they taking their medication, and because of releases, we're allowed to disclose that information to the probation officer, and the probation then says, okay, you're doing what you're supposed to do. Now I'm going to P-test you just to be safe. And now let's work on your home life, and let's work on getting family therapy. So there's so many supports and communication put into place when kids are released from detention centers that in 1871, obviously that was not even a thing. Probably just the mother was called and saying, hey, we're releasing your son in 10 days, and it's like, okay,
yeah,
so yeah.
that's unbelievable. Well, thank God for those processes, so that we don't have, or we limit the amount of cases that actually become like this.
Unfortunately, too, first of all, being a probation officer, as well as all the other supports in that process, is a thankless job. There's not a lot of money in, hate to bring it up, but there's not a lot of money funding in the mental health field, nor like in that part of policing. So it's unfortunate. And
also, what I've noticed that was strangely different was the the actual environment. A lot of his victims were just kids like playing in the street while playing, and he said, "Hey, let's go look at the ships down the dock. Let's go." He told one kid that I'll buy you some candy.
Yes.
He told one kid, if you help me with some chores, I'll give you 25 cents. Today, parents like kind of are like know exactly where, when, where the kids, who they're with, so on and so forth.
Helicopter parents.
Yeah, I guess this is the two extremes, right? Of what could happen when you just let your kids run wild, until the sun goes down and then come home.
Okay, there's two things. First of all, you have to look at the fact how common was crime against children back in that time. Now, I'm not saying crime against children never really happened, never happened, but it did, but not often. It wasn't very common. Like now, you have trafficking, and just so much going on. You have crimes against children. It's so scary. So back then, the crimes against children were not very common at all. So it wasn't, there was a lot of trust in the neighborhood. That's another thing too, is who typically in the neighborhood, even like we're talking 50 years ago with our parents, they knew everyone in the neighborhood, and everyone knew the kids, and those kids, and those, so
back in the late 19th century, was it that there wasn't much crime against children, or was it just not documented properly?
I mean,
or a combination of both?
it could be a combination of both. I think it's a combination of both. I don't think there was that much crime against children. I'm not saying there never was, but as much as what's going on now, I mean, again, the population too is incredibly different to the population now.
That's true.
So,
That's true.
So, and then look at now, fast forward to now, and the ease we have. My sister has twin girls, and they would wear watches that were GPSs.
Oh, okay.
So she would be able to see that they were in school. Then she'd be able to see that they were on the bus on the way home, and she could watch them go home through their watch just by a watch. It was just a regular little digital watch. And so the ease now and the simplicity of being able to monitor your kids is just so much better than it was in 1870, where you just had the trust of the neighborhood.
Right.
You know.
That's that does come into play. It's amazing how technology and the advancement of forensics and the advancement of mental health plays a huge role, and you don't realize it. You don't realize how much it plays a huge role. People tend to dwell on the negative parts of the overlooking of adolescents or children so much, as opposed to you take all that away and then you have what you had in 1870, and I think it's taken for granted today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What are you drinking? Coffee?
It's just what? No, God, I wouldn't be able to sleep. It's just water. It's a lot of talking. I need to replenish.
Yeah, you're not kidding. I had a big glass of water before I started this.
Yeah, see?
Yeah.
Dehydrate. Or hydrate, I should say. Well, I think it depends on what generation you come from. So, I would say the newer generations, it is taken for granted. They have no idea what it's like to wait on anything. Like you don't have to wait. Any information you want, it's simple. It just comes right up, just like that. I mean, and then you go 20 years ago when we had computers, you and I, it took forever for things to load and print, and then go even further. Not even everyone had a computer, So of course things are taken for granted, but it's just, to me, it's just such a positive to even have this information now that we're able to look and say, like I said, the checklist, I have this kid and, he hurts his cat and he pushes around his little sister, and now he's doing weird things with the neighbors' animals, and he's really into fire, and we got all this on top of which we have explosive behaviors, and it's just simple as that. It's check, he needs to go in this placement and get this help, and
that's it.
See what happens. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Well, thank God. That's God, because otherwise, every generation thinks they're better than the new generation.
Yeah.
But certain things are better and certain things aren't. That's really what it comes down to. And as much of a drawback some of the technology may be, there's tremendous benefits from it. That's for sure.
And the benefit back then was that because everyone knew everyone in neighborhoods like that, they were able to identify him before he had a third victim. You know what I mean? So, there's that too. Like we said,
when talk to their neighbors anymore.
Yeah, I know. And look at our parents, how they grew up. They knew everybody.
Right.
Everyone. You've heard the stories.
Sure.
I didn't know that all these people in the city, nonetheless.
Yeah. Well, they had nothing else to do. I mean, think about it. I mean, kids today they don't even have to leave the house.
No,
between Netflix and their laptop and their video games and on demand and Amazon Prime, and you just keep on going down the list. And if you don't make them join baseball, they're not leaving the house.
No, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
And especially, it's even worse now with the pandemic that, like you said, you have to do virtual classes. So, when back then it was like, after you come home from school, you put your play clothes on and go out and play till the sun goes down.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes.
Yeah. And when the sun went down, that's when you knew it was time to come home. And then in
Absolutely.
the invention of street lights, when the street lights went on, that's when you knew it was
Yes,
time to come home.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
And you stunk. You stunk. You
Yeah.
jumped right in the
Yeah,
bathtub.
yeah, that's so
You
true.
did. As a
Yeah.
kid, you smelled.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
But
the
and
truth.
then but you have different fears now too. So you talked about, okay, so we talked about child victims in the 1870s. What about now, when now you have technology and they're talking to people online, thinking they're talking to people their age,
Mm-hmm.
and they're just being groomed. Like essentially, Jesse Pomeroy was grooming these kids. Like you said, he would say, I'll pay you this to do that, and come look at the boats, and come look at this, and that's grooming. That's what he's doing. So there's now with technology, there's so many different ways to groom. So yes, the kids don't have to leave their room, but it's still so scary because you don't know who the hell they're talking to, and they could just be another victim without even ever having to leave the house. They're a victim.
Now, on the other side of the spectrum, I don't know if you remember this, but I sent you an article while I was on vacation. I was in Aruba because I saw it and I was like, oh, Maria would love this. And apparently there is a professor, or there was a professor in Harvard that taught psychology. But when he was 15 years old, he actually murdered his parents and his sister.
I briefly looked at that article.
And
Oh
then
my
he
God.
was able to become rehabilitated, and he went on to become a professor in an Ivy League school, and not only an Ivy League school, like the greatest Ivy League school in the country. I know it's amazing how, and that's just one example of how today there is help.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, and just I wonder how rehabilitated he is.
Yeah, and how does he process it? Because I thought about the same thing. Like, it's not like you're stealing candy.
No.
And you feel bad. Like, how do you, or if he does, have any kind of remorse, and how do you deal with that remorse?
My guess is there is no remorse, because I don't know how anyone could go on with their lives after killing their own parents.
Family, yeah, parents.
The
and
entire family.
sister. Yeah.
And like, unless they were in fact abusing him, and this was like a self-defense thing, which I don't think it was.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
So he just went batshit crazy and killed his family, and he would have to just have nothing attached to that to go on.
Yeah, I would think so, because of somebody who, any normal, anybody who's somewhat balanced would have, or not a psychopath, would have feelings and emotions over that. Yeah. And it would take a lifetime to fix it. And this person was rehabilitated, did his time, and then went on to become a PhD in teaching psychology in Harvard.
He's successful. Right. Yeah. So that just makes me wonder, what's his personality? Is there one, is he just flat and shut down? And
I would think so.
I wonder, or is he that, and he can play a good part? There's like a Dexter, like, it's just.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And you know what? That's when you would use the technology in like CAT scans and MRIs and stuff, and check out the wiring, because that's becoming so much more advanced too, where they're looking at the lobes, and especially the frontal lobe. When it comes to serial killers, they look at the lobe and it's just the hypothalamus. Amazing. Yeah. Oh yeah. They're able to see that something's different than that. And I forget what it is, but something's more enlarged or smaller than the typical. And it's just, that's what he should just be, that a lab rat, and just figure out what the heck is going on. But
so I let you pick the serial killer this time, because I picked the last one. And you went deep, deep, deep.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, maybe.
I wanted to go something atypical.
Yeah, I know. Well, because when you first sent it to me, I had no idea. And then I was doing cardio on the machine. I was like, all right, let me watch this video. Put it on, and I was watching it, and they went into detail of how he tortured these kids. I mean, one kid, he tried to gouge his eye out with pin, I think.
Yeah, he used like pins and he used to poke at him.
Another kid, he knocked his teeth out. And, he basically, when he killed the little girl, he told the police that he cut her from ear to ear, throat to throat. But he didn't tell her until they found the corpse that he almost decapitated her. He almost cut her entire head off. You
have to be very strong to do that.
Yeah, I was going to say, what kind of knife did he have? A freaking machete? Jesus
I know. Christ. Well, I kind of wonder, if any of the interview process they've ever done with him, did they ever ask if he ever truly wanted to murder them? Because I feel like he probably had more enjoyment
of
torturing them and then seeing them it's like watching your work, like an artist was looking at their painting. Like he would see them and because they're all local kids. And I kind of like from what I read, he went to murder because he didn't want to be found again. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I kind of wonder if he really didn't want to. Not that makes him a good person at all, but more so just to see his work, because I feel like he's that deranged.
Yeah, absolutely. And there was no remorse whatsoever. After he killed the little girl, I think he just covered over with like a sheet and went back to work upstairs in the newspaper spot that his brother started. And his mother basically said he was innocent till the end, that he was a good boy, he was a hardworking. His mother was in complete denial. Yeah,
that runs deep.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
Those victims' parents, though. Oh my God.
I can't even imagine. First of all, you have children. I don't have kids. So, I mean, it is almost unfathomable how I would feel, because I don't even experience the love of having children, but I see it with my brothers and their children, and my love I have for my nephews and nieces. Like it would only be tenfold for a parent, and then having to go through dealing with that tragedy. And it's not even like a tragedy where it's like, oh my God, they suddenly died of something. Knowing that they were tortured for God knows how long, right? And you're replaying that in your head. Oh, I can only imagine what it's like for the parents.
And how about that tug of war of emotion to where you have this awful, depression you're going through because you just lost your daughter or your son, because you killed the girl and boy. And let's assume that this is all assumption, but the little girl's parents, they're so incredibly distraught that their daughter was murdered, their 4-year-old girl. But then you find out it's from a boy, like a teenage boy, 14-year-old, 13, 14-year-old boy. And it's like, we're not meant to hate kids.
Yeah.
So you're not meant to have a deep disdain for children.
Yeah, that's why God makes them cute, so you don't kill them.
So how about those parents who you want to hate this person who took this precious life from you, and then you see a 14-year-old boy's face, and it's like...
Yeah, I wouldn't even be surprised if they doubted it at first. Like, no, can't be. Yeah. No 13, 14-year-old boy could be this sadistic. I wouldn't be surprised if they doubted it at the beginning.
Yeah, I wouldn't either. Or even just like the parents of the kids he beat up, and now you find out it's an 11-year-old boy that beat up truly tortured your child. Right. And you're looking at this 11-year-old boy like, I hate you, but I don't want to hate a child. Like, yeah. So I think about that. Like,
I can only imagine.
No.
Okay, who is the next serial killer we're doing?
Oh, that's up to you. Good gravy.
I don't know. It's we'll see. I don't know when we're gonna get back together because you're busy and I am getting an operation on Friday. So I will try to make some videos. I don't know if I'm gonna be capable of it. I'm gonna do my best.
I think you should just rest.
Yeah,
that's my opinion. Yeah. I know you're going to be bored and you might want to.
Yeah, good point.
But thankfully, it's not a severe one, right? I mean,
From what the doctors tell me, it's really not that bad. It's
How long like you go in and then are you home that night or?
I gotta stay one night over in the hospital, and then I'll be home the next day.
Okay. All right. So you're home the next day. Okay. All right.
Yeah. So it's 3 bulging discs and spinal stenosis that I need replaced and fused. So it's according to the
Sounds
doctors,
awesome.
yeah. According to the doctors, it sounds a lot worse than it is. So they
Okay.
actually go through your neck, and they actually with like microscopic surgery, they're able to push your trachea out of the way and get to the stuff in the back. So I don't know how to do it.
Amazing.
Yeah, I know.
Amazing.
Yeah, I know. I have no idea. So I don't even. He said you won't even see anything. It's just strange.
Can they videotape it though? And then you could post it on their podcast?
Yeah, you know how many subscribers I would get?
I know.
Oh my God, that would be it. That would go
Serial
viral.
killers.
Yeah.
His back surgery.
Yeah. You know what? Now I'm gonna ask him.
You should.
I know.
Oh,
You're a sick bitch. You're sick.
I think it's in the genes.
Yeah, you ain't kidding.
Yeah.
But listen, thank you very much. I appreciate everything again.
No problem. I enjoy this.
Another great topic, another great serial killer, if there's a such thing.
Interesting. I like to use the word interesting.
Yes, another interesting serial killer. Mm-hmm. And we'll definitely come back. We don't know when, but we'll definitely be back with another one. I get to pick the next one.
It's yours. All yours.
All right. I'll get the. We'll see. I'll think about it. I don't know. Okay. I was thinking about Dahmer because he ate people, right?
Yeah, he's super awesome.
Yeah, maybe. We'll see. I'll see what else there is.
Dahmer's great.
All right, Dr. Beagle, thank you very much.
No problem.
And
thank you.
We will see you soon.
Yes. Good night.
Okay. Good night.